Quick disclaimer before the video, I'm sorry the editing quality isn't what I would like it to be. I just had to get this out really fast before the movie comes out. Thanks.
Okay, so I saw the How to Train Your Dragon remake, and I've been hustling to get a review of it out before it comes out in the States. For perspective, I am an incredibly huge fan of this franchise, and have been since they came out when I was a kid. I'm a huge dork about these things, so I'm not exactly watching this from a neutral standpoint. I'm trying to be as objective about this review as possible, but I physically can't take my opinion out of it. That being said, let's get into it. How to Train Your Dragon 2025 sucks. Big time. It is a failure in basically every regard, and the more I think about it, the more things I dislike. Now, let's say you've never seen the original movie and you just thought it looked cool. Or maybe you're a parent who needs to get your kid out of the house for a while and you thought this movie was a good idea. Is the film okay from that regard? Yeah, sure, I guess, but watch the video. Hopefully, I'll show why you shouldn't do that. Right off the bat, I just have to ask the question, why did this even get made? Well, obviously the answer is money. I get that. But this is almost a one-to-one remake of a movie that came out 15 years ago. It's not taking a different angle to the story. It's not pushing some mind-blowing visual development. It's just the same thing again. You might think 15 years is a long time, but think about it like this. The original How to Train Your Dragon movie came out in 2010. Toy Story 3 also came out in 2010. Do you think Toy Story 3 needs a remake? Or The Social Network? Or Inception? Those all came out in the same time frame, and I have never heard anyone say, "Oh man, it's been so long since Inception came out, they should do a remake." This franchise is far from being outdated, too. The third and final installment came out in 2019. That was 6 years ago. How are we trying to make the argument that something that ended 6 years ago needs another run? And I could maybe understand an argument for a visual upgrade if the original movie came out in 1995. Toy Story 1 does not hold up that well visually. But the original How to Train Your Dragon is still gorgeous. And I'd honestly say in some instances it looks better than the remake. This isn't just from a graphics standpoint either. Obviously, when you work in animation, you're given more room to be expressive. Your characters don't have to follow the rules of real life. They can show more emotion, they can have exaggerated movements. But when you try and adapt that into live action, you run into a problem. Real people can't move like that. We're limited by flesh and bone, our body weight can't change at a moment's notice, and this is really visible in the remake. For example, look at Mason Thames in this scene. He takes one stiff, scared step backwards and then immediately tumbles into the rock behind him. Now look how animated Hiccup does it. Look, I'm not an animator by any means, but I can tell you from a visual standpoint that the animated version captures way more movement and emotion. That's the problem with the remake. These are real-life people forced to recreate the movements and expressions of animated characters, and unless you're Jim Carrey, that's just not physically possible. Another point for the original is that with any animated movie, the character designs have gone through countless iterations before you see them. They've been drawn and redrawn and modeled and remodeled and crafted specifically to embody the idea of that character. In real life, we aren't afforded that luxury. Look at the difference between Stoic in the original and the remake. The animated version cuts such an impressive silhouette. He fills up doorways when he walks through them. Look at where his beard meets his nose. He's literally designed to look like old artwork of Vikings. Meanwhile, Gerard Butler's shoulders can't even fill out his cape. I'm not body shaming him, I'm just saying that no man alive can achieve the Stoic body type. I understand that we physically can't cast people who are gonna look 100% like a character from an animated movie. My point is just don't make that movie. But let's move on to the story and the writing for a second. The story's great, because it's a remake of an already fantastic story with some minor tweaks, so it's kind of like passing a test because you cheated off of your smart friend. The small deviations from the original are meaningless at best and actively harmful at worst. There are several small tweaks and mischaracterizations, one line or two in every scene that made this much worse of a movie than it even had to be. For example, Astrid. In the remake, there's part of a scene that was never in the original. She talks about her upbringing and how she grew up with nothing. She resents Hiccup for his lifestyle and effectively calls him a Nepo baby for being Stoic's son. Now, first of all, that doesn't make any sense because Hiccup knowingly rejects the opportunities that he's supposedly given from that role. Every time Astrid talks about her ambition and how she wants to be chief, Hiccup supports it. He doesn't want the job and never did, and he enables her to get what she wants. On top of all that, it's a wild mischaracterization from the original movie. She never complained about what she did or didn't have. She never held it against Hiccup for his supposed role in their village. She worked hard and earned the respect of everyone in their community. In fact, in the original, Astrid was like a town hero that everyone loved and respected and cheered for. So then why turn around in the remake and try to make her complain about not being born into status? It just feels like an excuse to shoehorn modern storytelling ideas into the story in a totally unnatural way. Here's another example. Do any of you remember Snotlout's dad? No? That's because he doesn't matter. He has a collective 20 seconds of screen time across the entire original trilogy, if that. But in the remake, he's given more screen time than Roughnut, who's like a major franchise character. And for some reason, they keep showing this dad as like a neglectful father who's emotionally abusing Snotlout. Again, a wild character choice that was not in the original and adds nothing to the story. The worst part of that one is it doesn't even get resolved. The film goes out of its way to show this to you, and then it's mostly left hanging. But the most egregious example of these bad story tweaks actually still blows my mind days after I saw it happen. I wish I could pull the exact lines for you, but I'll do my best to summarize it. Basically, Hiccup has a few lines throughout the remake, maybe just 2 or 3, that seem to imply that the relationship between Burke and the dragons is an allegory for, I'm not kidding you, the colonization of Native Americans. I am not making that up. If that allegory was in the original trilogy, then I have completely missed it for the last 15 years of my life. And please correct me if I've said something horribly stupid here, but if we're supposed to follow that allegory to its natural end, isn't that a terrible thing? Because the positive outcome of the movie is that Burke is able to domesticate the dragons and build a new culture off of them. If the dragons are supposed to represent Native Americans, then that shouldn't be a good thing, right? I feel like I'm going crazy here. I mean, maybe I just had Dances with Wolves on my mind because I watched it again last week, but I swear to you, there are some bits of dialogue that very intentionally lead to you making that conclusion. It's bizarre, and the parts of the writing that haven't changed, again, it just doesn't really work. The original movie is snappy, it's well-paced, it has great comedic timing, and the remake loses all of that. It feels sluggish, half-hearted. None of the funny lines from the original got any laughs in the theater I saw it in. And that sucks because it's genuinely a very funny franchise with some great moments, and the remake saps all the life out of it. Not to mention the parts of the original they just forgot to add. The sequence with the terrible terrors where Hiccup learns that dragons aren't fireproof on the inside, gone entirely. So when he goes to fight the Red Death at the end of the movie, there's zero explanation given for why he knows how to do what he does. Or the part of Hiccup sneaking around the village with Toothless at night where Astrid becomes suspicious of him and it develops their connection. Gone. The remake swings and misses on what made the storytelling of the original so special. The new stuff is bad to the point of being downright disrespectful, and then they just miss important sequences from the movie that they otherwise just copied and pasted. The characters, unfortunately, aren't much better than anything else I've talked about so far. I usually try to not be a jerk when critiquing acting because these are real people with careers, and I am not a professional actor. But this is just honestly how it comes across when watching the movie. Mason Thames, who played Hiccup, was fine. He put in an admirable effort, but he's trying to capture the noodly awkwardness of an animated character from 2010. Times have changed. You can't really pull off the awkward shtick like that and still get away with it. Especially since Hiccup from a character design standpoint is made to be limp and move like a bunch of pool noodles. That kind of movement and expression physically cannot translate to flesh and bone. And I really think how Mason plays Hiccup isn't coming from the same place as the original and not for the better. Mason plays him with an angst and cockiness not really present from the first one. He's louder, his voice is huskier. He's trying to play Hiccup like he's from Game of Thrones. Listen to the comparison of these lines between the original and the remake.
They've killed hundreds of us!
And we've killed thousands of them!
They've killed hundreds of us!
And we've killed thousands of them!
Do you hear the difference? He's projecting with a rage that Jay Baruchel's Hiccup never had. Barrichel's Hiccup was physically weak. He was trying his best. He gets to really grow into his own man over the course of the movie. Tim's Hiccup already seems to have the independence he needs, and it's more of a matter of just not being affected when people insult him. And physically, he stacks up a lot closer to the rest of the cast than the animated version, so the distance between Hiccup and the rest of the Vikings doesn't really feel all that far out. Gerard Butler is the only actor to reprise his role from the original, once again putting on the helmet of Stoic the Bast. Gerard has some good moments, but he faces a unique challenge of being the only returning actor. He's delivered these lines before, and honestly, he delivered them better 15 years ago. He can't match up to his own work, and having the camera on him makes each line feel so much more boxed in. He's caught in a prison of his own creation by having already been in this movie. The worst part of the movie, by far, is the Fire Brigade, or whatever name they made up for Hiccup's crew of side characters. These actors are having to go up against performances from A-listers with phenomenal voice talent and add a physical element on top of that. Needless to say, they don't come close. Gabriel Howell, who plays Snotlout, can't hold a candle to Jonah Hill's natural comedic timing. Howell doesn't seem like he knows how to fit into this world, so he plays Snotlout like a bully from like a high school comedy. Ironically, he plays the role more like he's in Superbad than the guy who was in Superbad. Roughnut, who is one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy because she's hilarious and she's a nice change of pace from all the male, masculine personalities, got massacred in this. She is barely in the movie, and when she is a far cry from what made Roughnut likable. For some reason, they made her the, like, girl power, woo, yeah, like, why? That is completely contradictory to the original Roughnut, because that character didn't really care what people thought of her or traditional gender stereotypes, and that's what made her fun. Tough Nut was almost unbearable. TJ Miller is not a good dude, but at least he was funny when this came out. The actor in the remake is supposed to be the comedy relief of the movie, and he got 0 laughs in the theater I saw this in, ever. He is so fake sassy for some reason. He, practically turns Tough Nut into a side character from Mean Girls. Fishlegs was fine. He's not McLovin, but I like Julian Dennison. He looks incredibly unnatural in his costume and only slightly resembles Fishlegs, but at least he tried, which is more than I can say for some of the other actors. Nico Parker did her best as Astrid. I think she had a solid performance and can be a really talented actress, but she just shouldn't have been Astrid. Like I mentioned earlier, the rewrites gave her dialogue this air of modern snarkiness that was not present in the original. And again, was the costume department just blind in this? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Astrid not blonde? Does she not have blonde hair? Could we not have done a wig or some hair coloring or something?
And please don't mistake my meaning on this. I'm not saying this in a complaining about, oh, woke, DEI, blah, blah. It's just a matter of laziness from the production team of the movie.
Most of the cast of this movie looks like they dropped by Comic-Con and just picked up the first batch of cosplayers they could find. Toothless looks good in still frames, and he's easily the best looking of the dragons, but they lost so much of his expressiveness because they had to weigh him down to feel realistic. He doesn't have the personality of the original one at all. The awe of him being beastly when he's first captured, the suspicion when he and Hiccup are getting comfortable, the playfulness when they're becoming friends, it's all dumbed down and flattened for the sake of realism. A big aspect of the movie that I cannot understand is why Hiccup's relationship with Astrid is more important than his relationship with Toothless. The whole crux of the original movie is that Hiccup doesn't have community with the humans. He turns to Toothless because they're both one of a kind. And the story is so poignant because the dragon is the only one he can really talk to. The remake throws that out the window, though, and makes Astrid the defining relationship in his life. She's given much more screen time, and they love to cut to her during important moments. I walked out of the theater thinking more about how they handled her than they did Toothless, the mascot of the franchise. It's ridiculous. We gotta keep moving on. On a visual note, not great. The remake says, here's what you're looking at. You can fill in the gaps if you want to. And some of the stuff looks okay. I'm glad that I can count the individual scales on Toothless's face, or that the fire looks like real fire. But in the pursuit of hyperrealism, you lose what makes movies like these so magical. I don't want the dragons to be realistic. I want this to feel like a movie. I want it to be expressive and memorable and diverse and unique. And you just lose that feeling with these live-action remakes. Plus, the dragon designs are just not good. They try to streamline them to make them realistic, and you lose the individuality. Like, compare these two designs of the same dragon. Do you really think that from a movie-watching standpoint, the remake looks better? The remake looks like what would happen if you asked AI to draw you a red dragon. The original design is sharp, it's angular, look at the horns. It's designed to ride like a motorcycle. That gets abandoned here in the pursuit of realism. Or look at the Gronkle redesign. Look at how much color and personality gets drained from it in the remake. I know I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but what I'm trying to get across to you is that there's nothing wrong with animation existing by itself, which leads me into the last section of this review. On a technical level, the How to Train Your Dragon remake is probably like a 2 or 3 out of 5. It's a serviceable movie with a good story and consistent visuals. But the problem that we run into is that we are drawing from the same artistic well over and over again, and eventually that well is going to run out. The reason this franchise was so special when it came out was because it had never been done before. Before How to Train Your Dragon came out, no one had made a movie with this world and these characters. But this remake has been done before. We're telling the same story we told only 15 years ago, but worse. And I think this can only stand to harm our society from a storytelling standpoint. For one, the visuals. There are going to be kids that grow up with this remake and not the original movie. And what do these kids learn about imagination or creativity? They don't take in a world of fantasy that looks nothing like what they know in real life. They see realistic-looking dragons in a world that looks like theirs. I'm not a scientist, but it seems pretty obvious that the kids who learn from that are not going to have the same level of imagination as the kids who watch the original. 2. These remakes existing invalidates animation as a medium. The studios who put these out are effectively saying, the original movies that these are based on don't stand the test of time, so we're going to remake them for a new audience and make a bunch of money off of it. What happens to the original movies when these come out then? When you Google How to Train Your Dragon, it's going to now show pictures and articles of the remake. This is just, one, disrespectful to the people who worked on the original, and it's a little patronizing to audiences. Do you really believe that we're incapable of processing and appreciating a movie from 2010? Do you really think that movie doesn't still hold its own value? And I hear people saying, oh, well, this is just a refresher for a new generation of kids who weren't around when the original came out. Really? Do you hear yourself? Okay, Cars came out in 2006, 4 years before the original How to Train Your Dragon. I challenge you to find a kid these days who doesn't know who Lightning McQueen is. These remakes say, we don't think our audiences can still engage with the original movies in a meaningful way, and that's just not true. And finally, movies like these coming out are just not other movies. I know that sounds stupid, but listen. The How to Train Your Dragon remake had a budget of over $50 million. That money is going to this movie, not to something new, something original. DreamWorks and Universal spent $50 million to sell the same story twice. They could have used that money to fund a new idea that launches a new franchise, something that inspires a whole new generation of creators. Like I said, part of the reason How to Train Your Dragon was so special when it came out was because no one had made How to Train Your Dragon movies before. It's just exhausting to hear people complain about the lack of originality in Hollywood and how everything is a remake or a sequel these days. Then stop giving them your money. Stop seeing those movies and go see something original. I only went to see this because I had the opportunity to see it a week before all my friends in the United States could, and I wanted to be able to confidently tell them, don't go see this. So that's my final message of this long, ranting, stuck up, and kind of pretentious video. Please don't go see this remake. Don't validate the studio remakes with your money. Go watch the original instead and prove that animation has its own inherent value. Or go see Sinners again.